They buried someone with no name, no family, no one to claim the body. Closed casket, no photos. The report said he died in a fire. Accidental. But a week later, that same man sat on a jury, nodding solemnly as he listened to details of a murder he'd committed. At first, no one noticed him. Not the prosecutor, not the grieving mother in the front row, not even the defendant, who sat trembling in his ill-fitting suit, glancing nervously at the men and women who would decide if he spent the rest of his life behind bars, and certainly not the judge, who swore in the jury that morning and thanked them for their service. His name on the jury roll was Richard Allen Wyatt. There was a Richard Allen Wyatt in the DMV database, a social security number, a library card, a speeding ticket from 2 years back, all of it real, all of it traceable, except the man himself had never existed. Not before 6 months ago. He had created an identity from the bones of other men, and now he was deciding the fate of someone else. They called it a slam-dunk case. Cameron Delaney, a 26-year-old teacher's aide, stood accused of killing his landlord in cold blood. There was motive. He owed 3 months' rent. There was evidence, his fingerprints on the bat. There was even a witness. Though shaky, she claimed she saw Cameron running from the house. He had no prior record, just a quiet kid with tired eyes and a stutter that got worse the longer he spoke. The court-appointed attorney barely fought back. To the press it was open and shut. To the public it was just another crime headline to scroll past. To the jury it was their civic duty, and to juror number 6 it was something else entirely. He didn't speak much during selection. Just enough. Smart enough to blend, boring enough to forget. When he raised his hand to swear the oath, he locked eyes with Cameron Delaney. There was no flicker of recognition. That's how well the disguise worked. The beard, the glasses, the extra weight, the posture, the voice. He looked like the kind of man who worked in IT and complained about the price of coffee. Not a man who had killed someone with a hammer 6 months ago and faked his own death in a house fire that left the body unrecognizable. Not a man who, at that very moment, held the power to convict someone else for what he had done. 3 days earlier, a freelance reporter named Eli Jacobson had picked up a tip that didn't sit right with him. A body burned beyond recognition, identified only by a set of keys in a pocket and a dental record that was, strangely, never double-checked. Insurance payout had gone through. The police closed the file within a week. The house had burned to its foundation. No arson, no foul play. But something about the man who lived there, Eli Griffin, no relation to the reporter, nagged at him. Griffin had no relatives, no employer, no bank records prior to 2019. Just appeared. Like fog on a window. Eli Jacobson wasn't a detective. He'd written stories on local frauds, potholes, zoning disputes. But something about this case had teeth. He filed it away. Until, on a bored morning in court watching jury selection for the Delaney trial, his eyes caught a man in the jury box that looked vaguely familiar. Not much. Just the shape of the brow, the slight hitch in his left shoulder when he sat. It was nothing, and yet Eli scribbled the juror's name into his notebook. Richard Allen Wyatt. He didn't know why yet. Just instinct. Later, he would say, "I didn't know what I was looking at. I just knew something was wrong." Cameron Delaney couldn't stop shaking. He sat beside his lawyer as the prosecutor displayed the bat. Dried blood. A piece of the victim's scalp still embedded in the wood grain. A few gasps in the audience. Cameron closed his eyes. His lawyer whispered, "Don't react." But how could he not? He hadn't killed anyone. He hadn't even been home that night. He'd gone to visit his sister in another city. No receipts, no gas station cameras, just her word. And she was 16 and terrified of court. They hadn't even called her to testify. Now he was watching 12 strangers decide whether to believe he was a murderer. And one of them, was the real killer. The only man in the room with no reaction at all. Juror number 6 didn't blink when they showed the crime scene photos. He didn't flinch when the pathologist described the injuries. He just nodded occasionally, like a man solving a puzzle he'd already seen before. In truth, he didn't feel anything. Not guilt, not fear, just a sense of inevitability. He had watched the world sleepwalk for months while he walked among them. Groceries, coffee shops, bookstores. No one ever looked twice. Now he was going to finish the job. Put the crime in a box. Seal it. Watch them all clap for justice, and then walk away, Eli. Jacobson ran the juror's name through every public database he could access. Richard Allen Wyatt, born in Iowa, moved to Michigan, DMV renewal 3 months ago, voter registration, 2 utility bills, all real, all recent, all too perfect. No social, trace before 2019. No old Facebook, no LinkedIn. No high school yearbook mention. No obituaries in the family. No wedding records, nothing, like he'd stepped out of a vacuum. He compared the jury photo to the ID from the fire report. Hair different, nose altered, beard, glasses, but the eyes, the same. He ran a facial similarity check using old police software someone owed him a favor for. 2% match. He swallowed hard. There was no proof yet. But he knew. Eli Griffin hadn't died in that fire. He was sitting on the jury of the trial for the crime he committed. Juror number 6 didn't vote right away during deliberation. He waited. Watched. 3 were unsure. 8 were leaning guilty. 1, an older woman, had doubts. He gently nudged. Not much, just questions. If Cameron had done it, why not clean the bat? If it was rage, why leave fingerprints? He had no reason to defend Cameron, but he didn't want this to end too fast. He was enjoying it, the theater of it, the irony. He wanted them to choose justice, to point their fingers at the wrong man while he sat among them. It was his last performance, and it was nearly perfect. Eli called a contact at the paper. "I think I found something big," he said. They didn't care. Too risky. Accusing a juror of being a murderer during an active trial? Libel. Contempt, unless he had proof. Solid proof. He didn't. Not yet. So Eli sat in the courtroom the next morning. Second row. Watching, listening, looking for cracks. Juror number 6 glanced at him once. Only once. But it was enough. He knew. And for the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Not fear, but recognition, and a smile. Just a trace. Just enough to say, "You're too late." Cameron didn't sleep. He heard the guard's boots pacing. He replayed every word of the trial. He hadn't spoken. His lawyer said he shouldn't. "You'll come off nervous. We don't need to give them more to judge." But he wished he had, even if it didn't help. Even if it didn't matter. He wanted to scream, "It wasn't me!" Instead, tomorrow he would walk into the courtroom and hear whether he lived the rest of his life behind concrete. He thought of his sister. He thought of his mom, who'd died before any of this. He thought of the bat, the landlord, the juror who looked too calm. He closed his eyes and wondered if anyone would ever believe the truth. The jury was hung by morning. 6 leaned guilty. 4 wanted more discussion. 2 weren't sure. Juror number 6 liked that. He sat silently through the first hours, scribbling words on a yellow pad. Motive, proximity, panic. Words that made him look thoughtful. He circled the phrase, timeline inconsistency, but never spoke it aloud. By the second hour, the older woman, Mrs. Linton, had grown more vocal. "I just keep thinking," she said, tapping her pen on the table. "Why kill? Someone over rent? That doesn't add up. Not with how he looked on the stand. He was scared, yes, but not angry." A younger man scoffed. "He ran. He didn't report it. He cleaned nothing. That's guilty behavior." "He ran because he knew no one would believe him," she said. Juror number 6 tilted his head. Interesting perspective. It was the first thing he'd said all morning. All heads turned toward him. He gave a soft smile. I'm still thinking. It's a complicated case. And just like that, he was the wise neutral, the voice of reason, the one who balanced the scale. In a gas station parking lot down the street, Eli Jacobson sat in his car, the heat on full blast, hands clenched around a coffee he hadn't sipped. Yudish stared at the manila folder in the passenger seat. It held printouts, comparisons, an unconfirmed match, and a sick knot in his stomach. He had told himself, don't get involved. But he had already crossed that line the moment he saw the juror smile. That smile wasn't just recognition, it was ownership. It said, this story is mine. Try to take it, and I'll bury you too. He opened his laptop and began typing. He needed a source, someone who could confirm what no one wanted to believe. He needed to find someone, anyone, who knew Eli Griffin before he died, if anyone ever had. Deliberation. Paused for lunch. Juror number 6 stepped outside alone, walking toward the smoking section. Though he didn't smoke. He stood by a tree, watching the wind rustle through discarded wrappers. He liked the smell of the cold. It reminded him of that night, the house burning behind him, the fake body planted in his clothes, a squatter, a drifter, someone no one would look for. The body had been unrecognizable. The fire had been perfect. He didn't look back then. He didn't look back now. He checked the courthouse glass for reflections. That reporter, Eli, was still hanging. Around. He'd seen the way Eli watched him. It wasn't casual anymore. It was forensic, and that meant his window was closing. He would have to accelerate the timeline. Push the jury harder, make them seal the deal before Eli connected the last dot. At a nursing home 15 miles away, an old man named Marvin Dunleavy sat in a recliner watching daytime court TV with the sound off. His daughter stopped visiting 6 months ago. The nurses were kind but rushed. He kept to himself, mostly memories and crossword puzzles. But today, when a local news brief flashed a photo of the trial in progress, something flickered across his face. A juror. Second row. Balding. Glasses. A slight smile. His hand trembled. He hit the call button. When the nurse arrived, he pointed at the screen and whispered, "That man. I knew that man once." The nurse glanced at the screen. "The one in the jury?" "Yes." "What about him?" "He used to have a different name." Eli checked every address the supposed Eli Griffin had ever lived at. Only one came up. The burned house. Nothing before that. But the deed transfer was strange. Sold for cash. No mortgage. No previous ownership trail. No digital footprint. No tax return. Nothing older than 4 years. It was as if he had arrived from nowhere. He even checked the medical examiner's report on the burned body. No DNA test was done, just dental confirmation, and the dentist had died 6 months earlier in a traffic accident. There was no one left to verify. It had been airtight. Too airtight. Eli cursed under his breath. He wasn't chasing a killer anymore. He was chasing a ghost with a plan. Back in the jury room, voices were rising. Mrs. Linton argued with 2 men over reasonable doubt. "Are we just going to pretend the timeline makes perfect sense?" she snapped. "Maybe it doesn't have to," said the taller man, shrugging. "Look at the motive, the opportunity." He had no history of violence. People snap. Juror number 6 finally stood, quieting the room. "Let's try something," he said. "Let's walk through the timeline again, minute by minute. Maybe we missed something." They agreed. And so, minute by minute, he walked them through the prosecution's version, leading them, correcting where needed, reinforcing the idea that they, as a group, were uncovering truth together. It was brilliant. It was manipulative. And it was working. By the end of the hour, even Mrs. Linton had grown quieter. At 6:40 p.m., Eli got a call from a restricted number. "This is Marvin Dunleavy," a trembling voice said. "You don't know me, but I saw something today. A man on TV. I knew him by another name." Eli sat up straighter. "What name?" "Michael Ramsey. We worked together in construction in 2005. He had an accident. Disappeared soon after. You sure it's the same man?" "Same face, just older. Same scar on his right temple. I watched him cheat people, threaten people, but the law never touched him. Then one day he vanished." Eli scribbled notes. "Did you ever report him?" "Once. They said no such person existed. No ID, no trace. He was a shadow." Eli's breath caught. He had confirmation now. Not legal proof, but something real. The killer had been alive once as Michael Ramsey. He'd faked a death as Eli Griffin. And now, he sat on the jury as Richard Wyatt. 3 names, 1 monster. Deliberation stretched into evening. 10 jurors now leaned guilty. 1 was unsure. Mrs. Linton still held out, but her voice was smaller. Juror number 6 watched her. She was the only threat left. He could flip her tomorrow. He could push. Just enough. After all, it wasn't about Cameron anymore. It was about control. He wanted to see the machine of justice crush the wrong man. That was the game. That was the joke. That was the masterpiece. But then, a knock. A court officer opened the door. "Jury dismissed for the evening. You'll reconvene tomorrow." Juror number 6 didn't blink. But deep inside he felt something shift. 1 more day meant 1 more risk. He needed to finish this. Soon. Eli didn't sleep that night. He mapped out every known alias, every connection. Ramsey, Griffin, Wyatt, same man, different ghosts. He couldn't go to the police yet. He had nothing admissible. But he could go to the public. He began drafting the article. Every word had to be right. Libel laws would eat him alive if he got one thing wrong. But the truth? The truth was now undeniable. 1 juror in the Delaney trial was the killer. And the longer he sat on that jury, the more likely an innocent man would be buried while the real murderer walked out the front door. Unless Eli moved fast. Morning came. Mrs. Linton arrived pale and exhausted. She glanced at juror number 6 several times during the early session. He remained calm. Neutral. He suggested another vote. It was now 11-1. She was the last. "I still have doubts," she whispered. He leaned closer. "What kind of doubts?" "Instinct. Nothing I can name." He nodded, his voice low. "Sometimes our instincts come from fear, not fact. Maybe you're just afraid to make a hard call." She looked at him, uncertain. "Or maybe," he added softly, "you're the only one still thinking clearly." That threw her off. Reverse psychology, push and pull. He was dancing now. It wouldn't take long. 1 more hour, and he'd be free. At 10:38 a.m., Eli hit publish. The article hit the wire. Headline: "Is there a killer on the jury? A shocking discovery behind the Delaney trial." He laid it all out. The fire, the fake death, the false ID trail, the 3 names, the confirmation call from a former colleague. He didn't name the juror, but he painted the picture perfectly. And within 20 minutes, it was trending. Courtroom staff got wind. The judge was alerted, and just before the jury reconvened for final deliberation, the room was locked down. A bailiff entered quietly and whispered into the 4-person's ear. Juror number 6 sat perfectly, still, no expression, no fear, just waiting. He knew. He knew the story had broken. He glanced at the door. His escape had just vanished, but even as the courtroom shifted, he smiled again. Not panic, not defeat, something else. As if to say, "Let's see what you do now." The jury never made it back into the deliberation room. Before they could be seated, the courtroom doors were closed. Bailiffs stepped forward. The judge appeared early, face taut, voice low. "There has been a development," she said, glancing at her clerk. The court has been informed of a potential procedural breach that may affect the integrity of the jury. Juror number 6 didn't flinch. He sat perfectly still, one leg crossed over the other, pen balanced between his fingers. He'd rehearsed this 100 times. Contingency. If the heat came, remain calm. Say nothing. Let the system blink first. The judge cleared her throat. We are temporarily suspending deliberation while we evaluate the credibility of these claims, the courtroom murmured. Delaney's attorney leaned in close. Something's happening. Cameron could barely breathe. He had felt the noose tightening all week. Now, for the first time, it loosened. Outside, reporters scrambled. The article had gone viral. Not just the tabloid blogs, mainstream outlets picked it up within hours. A killer faked his death, sat on a jury, decided the fate of a man accused of his crime. It was too wild to be real, too perfect to ignore. By midday, camera crews surrounded the courthouse. The judge ordered the jury sequestered. One by one, they were taken to a private room and interviewed. When it was juror number 6's turn, he didn't argue. He walked in with his hands in his pockets, sat down, folded his fingers. 2 investigators waited. No uniforms, just questions. He looked from one to the other and smiled. I read the article, he said before they asked anything. And it's fiction. Compelling, but fiction. Is your name Richard Allen Wyatt? That's what's on my license. Have you ever gone by Eli Griffin? He chuckled. No. Or Michael Ramsey. Should I have? They slid photos across the table. Fire damage, DMV records, surveillance stills. Still, he didn't blink. People see what they want to see, he said. Coincidence is not conspiracy. But your facial structure matches 3 separate identities. Your software must need calibration. They pressed. He deflected. Not once did he raise his voice. They couldn't arrest him. Not yet. But they kept him under watch. The trial was paused, and the game had changed. Back at his motel, Eli Jacobson watched the coverage unfold. His hands were shaking. He'd written hundreds of stories, none like this. He didn't know if it would save Cameron or catch the man. But he knew one thing. He'd ripped the mask off in time. Now the system had to decide what it was willing to do with the truth. Cameron Delaney sat in holding. No verdict, no sentence, just silence. His attorney returned late that afternoon, carrying 2 coffee cups and a file. You may get a new trial. Cameron blinked. What? The article. The juror. It's enough to trigger judicial review. But what does that mean? It means someone believed you, and for the first time in months, Cameron cried. Not in panic, not in despair, but in sheer disbelief that maybe, just maybe, the nightmare would end. 2 weeks later, the court declared a mistrial. The jury was disbanded. The judge recused herself. Delaney was released on bond. Juror number 6. Gone. Disappeared. Again. No arrest warrant, no formal charges. Not enough to hold him. He had slipped through. Just like before. Just like always. But this time, people were looking. Eli Jacobson kept digging. He traced Michael Ramsey's past. A bar fight in '06. A woman missing in his '09. A storage unit rental under a 4th alias. Each thread frayed, but not useless. He published a series. The Man with Too Many Names. How a Killer Sat in Judgment of the Innocent. Inside the justice system's biggest blind spot, he was nominated for a journalism award. But he didn't care about the trophies. He cared that people knew. He cared that Cameron was free. And he cared that somewhere out there, a man with dead eyes and a new face might be watching, waiting. 6 months later. Chicago. New name, new license, new job. He called himself Derek Linwood now, worked as a mid-level compliance officer, kept his head down, paid in cash when possible. Rented a small apartment with an alley exit. But habits die hard. Every Tuesday night, he went to the courthouse gallery, sat quietly in the back, watched trials, listened. He liked it. He liked the structure, the silence before the verdict, the power of the spoken word. But this time, someone else was watching. A woman, gray coat, sharp eyes. Private security? Cop? No, too subtle, too patient. She followed him once. He caught her reflection in a storefront, smiled. They're learning, he thought. But they were still too slow, too bound by rules. He'd vanish again before they had the chance. Meanwhile, Cameron started over, moved states, changed his number, got a job fixing air conditioners with his cousin. He didn't speak of the trial, or the bat, or the man on the jury who didn't blink. Sometimes he dreamed of that face, calm, watching, judging. But in the mornings, the sun came through his blinds the same way it used to, and he remembered what his sister had told him once. Sometimes surviving is the only justice you get. He'd survived. That would have to be enough. Years passed. The story faded. But not completely. Law schools used the case as a cautionary tale. Never underestimate the power of the system to miss what it doesn't want to see. Podcasts covered it. True crime fans speculated. Some believed he was dead. Some believed he was in Alaska. Others thought he'd never existed at all. But one thing remained true. The man had sat in the heart of justice, and no one had known. He had. Looked 12 people in the eye, smiled, guided them, judged them, and nearly walked away clean. Until one journalist saw through the lie. Until one juror had a whisper of doubt. Until a system, flawed and slow, stopped just long enough to ask the wrong question at the right time. That question saved a man, but the answer was still out there, wearing a new name and waiting to be believed.